Thank you, Erica. It's amazing to be here. I'm kind of welcome everyone, and I'm really great to be here. My name is Illia, and I would like to talk more about why usability matters. And kind of to start with, our global vision is a world where all people can control their assets, data, and power of governance, right? And I think like a lot of the space of Web3 space shares this vision, but we have kind of not been making that much progress to achieve that. And I think like from a high level, there's very specific things that we need to do, right? And foremost, we need to make it simple for people to use. And so it needs to be simple, it needs to be secure, it needs to be scalable and sustainable. And so the way we measure this is by how many people are actually using the system, right? And kind of, on Near, this is the amount of users, but I think like in Web3 in general, this is a very important metric, like how many people are actually actively engaged, are kind of switching to this ecosystem. And kind of our approach is by building the most usable blockchain, by building something that everybody can build and use on, we can achieve kind of this like audacious goal of billion users in 5 years. And we're about 1.7% complete in less than 2 years, and have been growing very, very nicely. Now, Near itself is not just a protocol, right? We started by building a kind of original code for the layer 1, but the reality is it's a whole ecosystem, right? It's everything from kind of a lot of open source infrastructure that works together. It's a lot of kind of various applications, but even more importantly, there's a lot of communities, people, go-to-market teams, kind of labs that are building projects, helping people to onboard, are figuring out how to bring this ecosystem together. And kind of to mention just a few pieces of the infrastructure, it's all started with Near protocol, right? It's open source, everybody can contribute, everybody can work on it. There is a number of pieces that contribute to it. For example, Aurora is a smart contract that runs on top of Near. It, in some way behaves like a layer 2 because it provides a very different user experience to the users than Near protocol itself does. But it actually is fully integrated and is just a smart contract, just an execution environment that runs. We have Calimero, which is a private shard. It allows to run for an enterprise, for a company, even for a DAO, a shard that is not kind of broadcasting all of the transactions and data to everyone in the ecosystem, but instead, can be run in a secure enclave or behind a private firewall, and still have all of the same communications with other applications in the ecosystem. Right? It can still use exactly the same naming conventions. It can use the same transactions, can use the same smart contracts. Similarly, we have on Machina, which is a way to store larger blobs of data and use data sampling to prove that they're there, kind of outside in different nodes, but still have a way to prove all of this data inside Near protocol. And I would mention Pagoda because I mentioned some of this before, is Web3 startup toolkit, right? It's everything that you need to build startups in the kind of Web3, and trying to build kind of the fastest way for you to launch and run applications. So beyond that, right, the ecosystem doesn't live in isolation. And so we've, from the start, connected to Ethereum and kind of figuring out how to work together with other ecosystems. And so Rainbow Bridge is our trustless and permissionless protocol to communicate. It uses light client verification on both sides to pretty much prove the communication between two chains. It actually is not just a bridge, it's a way to read data on the other side. You are able to read the state of Ethereum smart contract or transactions in Near contract and the other way around. You can actually prove to a smart contract on Ethereum some state on Near. And this allows to actually, obviously develop any kind of bridging assets, but also more importantly, bridging kind of information and communicate this. We have Aurora that I mentioned, which is a way to run kind of a full EVM, right, on Near that allows developers and through that, users who want to build in Solidity, who want to build with existing tool set, to just launch their smart contracts on Aurora. And users with MetaMask can use it exactly as is. This is Ethereum layer 2. And we have Octopus, which is a way to run application chains, right? Even though Near provides kind of a number of scalability, there's always have some modification, like some applications that need some modification on a deeper level. And you can actually lease security by using Octopus with your upchain, and pretty much by providing a portion of your token supply, a number of validators will run your runtime. You just need to publish WebAssembly on Near protocol. It will get picked up by the validators. So beyond that, there's obviously a lot more applications coming kind of in this interoperability state. But the point is, like, Near is not trying to be isolated ecosystem. It's trying to connect. It's trying to figure out how to deliver developers experience and bridge the gap. And at the same time, it's not just about, as I said, builders. It's about bringing it to market, funding it, helping people. We have a lot of developers who, got excited about this idea, right? Me, myself included, but did not know how to actually bridge this gap between, writing code and actually people using it in the wild. And so what we've tried to do is actually spin up a number of different vertical funds and labs that are helping developers across the ecosystem to succeed. And so just to mention a few, for DeFi, there's a proximity labs that actually working with DeFi project and ecosystem, connecting them together, providing them grants, and helping them to actually bootstrap their economy. We also have a number of EcoFund VCs that are helping projects to launch. And on the other side, to be truly global, which I think we're all striving to be, we actually need to be very local. And so to do that, we actually started a regional hub program where we have independent hubs started in different regions, in different countries, in different cities, which are kind of combining both the marketing and community in that location. They have usually some of the funding available for the projects that come into them. They have kind of their own product labs and talent education platform. And they're really providing kind of a place where you can come in and start working with Near ecosystem, know that somebody there is, knows about Near ecosystem and can help. And so we've kind of started in China. We've expanded in Ukraine. That sadly right now kind of split between Ukraine and Portugal. We have Balkans, Kenya, LATAM, and we're actually excited to start a whole host of new ones, including in Korea. So stay tuned for that. Now, the way we think about the ecosystem, right, is there's three major pillars of use cases. There's three major pillars of the way this kind of Web3 will grow. And there's a clear kind of finance component, right? I think we have seen the success of this over especially past 2 years with DeFi. There's a clear creator economy component that we've seen some of the successes, but there's way more of things coming, right, in coming years. And even I think what's important is social. Social is how you connect people. Social right now is very centralized and it's very kind of controlled in a way that even the people who run the social platforms don't want to, right? Like Twitter, Reddit, all of them came out and said they don't want to do the policing of the content, but they need to. And so the kind of social will also move to this. And so you have kind of these three major pillars. There's, the technologies that power them, DeFi, NFTs, DAO tooling, like those are all just technologies that power the use cases. And then what's even more important, I think, and that kind of we continuously forget, is that if we just give users a kind of one of these, games or DeFi instruments, like they still need a way to onboard. They still need to wait the first way to get, their first token on their hand. And so this is where I think the really important pieces are user onboarding, which allows kind of users who don't know anything about crypto, who don't know anything about kind of, and maybe don't have funds to, buy their first crypto, to actually start interacting with the system. And kind of one of the examples is Sweatcoin, which is Move to Earn, as well as Tracer, who are actually here in Korea. This is a way for people to kind of start doing the thing they do, and pretty much, in a way, this is the same model as, kind of adds, but provides a way more, I would say, fair system where you trade off, some of the movement and attention to, first initial onboarding into crypto. Similar, there's Near Crowd, which is a mechanical Turk-like system for data collection, which allows people to start doing some small tasks and start earning their first crypto as well. So this is a way, and Brave is another example. This is a way to get users into this whole system that then kind of creates a very powerful flywheel, right? Because as you come in, you learn about creators and creator economy. You connect with them through social. Through all of this, you have some financial instruments, and then you're onboarding and offboarding through different kind of financial tools. Now, kind of at the core of all of this is usability, right? Like we cannot achieve billion users if we don't have a way for people who don't know that people who think that Facebook is internet to onboard into this. And so most of the protocols, most of the, even applications don't have a usability on their roadmap. They don't think about kind of the end user because, I mean, honestly, being a, back-end engineer myself, it's way more fun to think about the kind of the technology of the systems and not about kind of how to make the user's life easier. And at the same time, for me, scalability and security should go hand in hand with usability. Like from perspective of security, right? If the system is not secure, not just on the protocol kind of layer 1, layer 2 level, but kind of fundamentally there are flaws in kind of the system that people use, it's not usable. You are afraid of using it. And we know this because this keeps happening, that people getting rug pulled, things getting stolen. So I'll start just to cover a little bit on usability for developers, kind of what decisions we made to make it easier for developers to build and kind of expand their applications. And I think to start with, I want to kind of, in contrast with what Vitalik was mentioning about layer 1, layer 2, for me, kind of for the values we present, the way to separate and allow kind of having a different stack of projects to build a scalable and kind of an easier user experience, it always leads to kind of drop in performance and add in latency. And kind of the reason for this is, and I would say a good example is something like PC versus Apple, right? PC had a huge surge of creativity and experimentation that happened because it had kind of a huge modularity, right? You had a lot of pieces, kind of different providers were trying and making and improving different things, but at the end, they all were limited by set of kind of sockets and APIs pretty much that they were trying to agree on. And at the same time, you had Apple, which was taking a very integrated approach, right? Which meant it took them a little bit longer to kind of catch up with some of the fast technology innovation, but then they outperformed kind of PC on integrated experience, like on kind of making sure that every single thing works together. And this is like going back to usability, right? I think that's one of the most important pieces. So you do have a trade-off of modularity leading to more experimentation, to have more people trying different things, right? I think like we see kind of L2 space in Ethereum creating like an insane amount of really cool technologies. But at the same time, the experience that users have is very fragmented. It's very kind of like needs to push on the user to understand what's the difference between all those things and which one to pick at what time. So what we've tried to do is hide kind of this complexity under the hood of the protocol while still allowing to have an engineering modularity, right? So underneath, there's still modularity, and Aurora is a good example of allowing to build pretty much an execution environment in a layer 2, but completely as a smart contract without needing to kind of separate it out into another project. And this is done because near sharding is actually every single smart contract is its own kind of virtual chain, but they're all grouped physically kind of on demand to optimize the number of kind of compute that needed. And so this kind of a very different paradigm than most of the other approaches are taking allows to, for example, take Aurora and when it gets enough usage, which it did, to push it out and have its own kind of physical shard while still maintaining the same 1 second block, 2 second finality for everyone. And developers and users don't need to think about any of this. They don't need to think which physical shard is what on at any point of time. This all happens underneath the surface. And so we also have a sharding roadmap that spans years. And the kind of one of the interesting things we had late last year is that we went from a 1 shard to 4 shards in the system without zero kind of downtime or impact on developer user experience, right? Like the network actually resharded, and meaning it moved different contracts between different shards without actually impacting how users or developers need to look, think, or do anything in the system, right? And that's kind of the idea. We also are launching a next phase, chunk-only producers, in September 2022. This is going to increase number of validators. And to be clear, like this is a trade-off. The trade-off is there's less validators than EASE-2 has. It's less validators than kind of usually you would expect because we are trying to achieve this simple, fast kind of finality. But at the same time, with more shards, with more kind of capacity needed for the system, more validators will be increased, kind of number of validators will be increasing linearly with that, with the capacity needs. Meaning, kind of the more block space is needed, the more validators you have in the system. So next phase will be eliminating the kind of sounds of validators that tracking all shards. This is right now runs for security reasons to ensure that everything is correct. And the final stage is what I mentioned, kind of a dynamic reallocation of contracts, right? Right now, this is still done kind of through a technical governance where, Aurora should have its own shard. But over time, we can actually have systems similar to what, you have in Amazon, right? You don't need to think like which physical computer is your, services run on. Amazon kind of underlying services will, bundle virtual machines when they need to, and they will unbundle them when some spike in usage happens. And so that's the idea is at the end, again, this is all the same experience for users and developers, nothing changes, but your application will at some point will have a whole chain of capacity when it needs to, and then will be bundled back, and you're just paying for whatever kind of usage you get, not for full chain of security. So that's the idea, kind of at the end, hiding the complexity of the underlying protocol and providing users and developers kind of a single experience, and then allowing, including core engineers, protocol engineers, to continue innovate and continue come up with new ideas on how to improve this. On the other side, developers like to have tools. And so if you're familiar with Python, there's this kind of meme of batteries included. Like it means that it doesn't come just, here's like build some smart contracts. It comes with a whole host of tools that you would expect and would need to build everything from, command line interface, a really easy way to create, template apps, examples, wallet selectors, a number of other things. We have a number of major RPC providers, including Pagoda itself and Infura. We have a way to scalably read data through a indexer framework and data lake framework, which actually allows you to quite kind of quickly build your own scalable data lakes for your systems. And the reality is in blockchain, even though we have, we measure on TPS, a lot of the times the limit is actually on reading data, right? There's like millions and millions of kind of requests per second of reading data for any, 10, 20 transactions per second that happens. You have analytics, triggers, and more via Pagoda. Check out pagoda.co. And importantly, because we picked WebAssembly as like underlying environment, this means that you can write in any language that compiles to it, which is, I don't know, like 40, 50 of compilers, but specifically the two major SDKs, which is Rust and JavaScript, that pretty much allow you to build in, one of the most loved languages and one of the most maybe hated, but widely spread. And obviously, there's a ton of education that's happening in the ecosystem to make sure that people know how to do all this. I don't want to mention JavaScript specifically because, first of all, it's launching August 8th, so please wait for that. There's over 20 million JavaScript developers, right? I mean, I think any developer who've kind of been building for more than a few years knows some JavaScript. And the idea that you can just kind of write not just your front end that already everybody does in JavaScript, but also your smart contracts in it allows to kind of really unlock the Web3. And the idea is like it's as simple as just running some npx commands and starting. The way we enable this is actually because we took the QuickJS, the virtual machine, the full virtual machine of JavaScript, and just ran it as a smart contract in WebAssembly. Right, and so that's kind of the idea that like this WebAssembly enables us to run any generic code that you want as a smart contract. Obviously, there's a lot of security questions that you need to make sure you handle, but the idea is that you can actually take any of the existing code. So here's a quick example. You can just npx create new app, select JavaScript template, and you actually have a project with JavaScript smart contract. You just call yarn deploy that hits it to a testnet, and then you can also start the front end as well. And you have an app that you can connect to a web wallet. So you don't need to install anything. You can spin up your app. This is like about 15 seconds to get actually having a full-featured app working, and it's all in JavaScript. You don't need to learn any new languages. You don't need to kind of get outside of that. Now, developers, are used to kind of complex systems, but if we go back to users are actually the ones that need kind of simplicity the most. And so we started when we designed Near Protocol, we started by changing how account model works. We started because we believed that using kind of a public key as your identifier is too complex for kind of the majority of people. And so the identifiers on Near are human readable, like Illia.near, and each account has a number of different keys with different permissions, which allows a multitude of kind of use cases, everything from having different devices having different keys. You can rotate key for security. For example, if there's a suspicion that some wallet has an issue, you can just rotate your key without needing to move all your assets from your account, or potentially you have things that are locked on that account. You have ability to program specific keys for specific actions and give them allowances, right? The simplest example is you log into a game. That game actually gets a public key that it can use to send transactions without going back to the wallet every time, right? So you can actually interact with the chain from your app without going to a wallet because you allowed this key to have a specific set of permissions. Obviously, this is really easily to get to multisig compatibility. And you can delegate to other parties a way to recover your key. And I think this is the most important piece. Right now, people are afraid of losing their seed phrases. People are afraid of kind of something getting corrupted in the whole thing, right? We need to write down seed phrase and store it in some secure place. That's very complex if you're talking about kind of majority of users. A way to delegate to, for example, a bank or a host of friends or maybe some other institution or application that you're using in a way, not the custody of your assets. They're not able to move or do anything on your behalf. The only thing they're able to do is to kind of suggest the replacement of a key on your account, and it's on a delay, right? So, for example, you lost your seed phrase, you call up your bank, you pass through a KYC process, and they kind of create this recovery stage where your key will be replaced in 7 days. Now, if bank tries to do it without your consent, then you can actually literally sue them, right? That's one of the benefits of having a legal entity on the other side. And so you have a very interesting way where you can go away from kind of a custodial approach where banks will take your money and lend them somewhere, and self-custody where you kind of yourself your own bank, and if you lose anything and if you don't have security set up, you can always, of course, create like a number of allowances so you cannot move or do something after that as well. And a really cool thing, you can actually use a single-use private key as well. You can actually give somebody a single-use private key to send a single transaction to do something. And there's a lot of use cases how you can expand that. All right. And so this goes into security, right? Kind of the usability right now is not there. And it's not just the seed phrase, it's also that contracts and applications that people are using getting hacked. They're not always clear to the user if the intent of the smart contract is right or it's malicious. And so the ways to go this is actually invest in usability itself, right? And so we can have contract registries which contain audits, contain kind of bug bounties, have a public security kind of notes if this contract, for example, has an issue. One of the examples is that people cloned kind of contracts that had a bug, and then nobody could find out who these people are to notify them. And users continued using contracts with bugs, even though like it was known that there's a bug. Like all the security researchers knew that there's a bug, but people continue using them. So surfacing all this information in the wallets, surfacing this information to the user directly is really important. Enabling something that goes beyond kind of this full custody, like full self-custody, to something that's progressive, but also potentially active, meaning when you send a transaction, it doesn't just go through to the it needs a cosigner, and the cosigner can verify that this transaction is not trying to move all your money in one transaction, right? That seems suspicious, right? So you can actually have like active machine learning models that kind of track transactions and understand if there's a malicious intent. And so all that is doable by having kind of this like flexible key management model. So just to show some examples, there is a way to, tooling to create DAOs. So for me, DAOs is new way to create organizations and kind of ways that is not just company and it's not just community. It can be anything in between. And so this is one of the tooling on Near that in about 5 seconds you can start a DAO and configure it to have any permissions you want. Everything from normal corporate structure with token holders that are voting on board members, that are voting on the exec team, to a fully kind of even power community that voting on investment decisions and buying some DGen NFTs, right? And another example is I mentioned like a single-use private key is you can send a single-use private key in a URL that when user clicks on, it actually just allows it to create an account and claim directly the NFT that were sent with this link. So even if you don't have an account, it kind of allows you to go through this process. And so like this experience is something that, first of all, actually unique to Web3 because you cannot send in any Web2 system, you cannot send funds or assets to someone who's not registered in that system. And here, because it's kind of peer-to-peer, you're able to do this. And so I think that kind of unique experiences is what we need to do, right? It's something that you can literally send a link to your friends, and if they don't have a wallet, if they don't know what crypto is, they can just sign up really easily, enter their username, and off they have kind of this system. So there's a lot of things happening already, but what's next? On infrastructure side, there's still a lot of kind of privacy questions and compression especially that can happen through zero-knowledge proofs. I think we've had a huge progress kind of over the past few years with zero-knowledge proofs, and Vitalik mentioned a lot of really exciting projects. Compression is especially important because you can both get performance out of it, but also I think like client zero knowledge proof can be a really powerful tool to decentralize and to provide better security for the wallets. The governance is really important, right? I mentioned that being one of the core pillars for our vision, part of governance, and so we want to have a decentralized governance, but it needs to be structured and it needs to be decisive. And so we've been making progress on that, but there's still a lot of work. I think the other really important part is community-governed AI. I think the AI has made tremendous strides in the past 5 years, and it is locked right now in kind of big companies, and we really need to start kind of getting it out, getting it looped in with Web3 in general and with the community. We're also working a lot on synchronous sharding. Kind of right now, because of this model of having each contract being almost its own chain, we have a asynchronous communication between smart contracts. And that has its own benefits because this is actually the way to scale, but it also has its own limitations that you cannot do some of the things. And we right now already have things like Aurora and other applications which are kind of creating an environment, synchronous environment inside. And so we're trying to expand that and shard that as well. And then I think really important is bridging TradFi and DeFi. I think we are at the stage now where we have enough kind of systems in DeFi that are transparent, that are clear, that actually prove they work. And we need to start bringing real-world assets and kind of crypto banking to the users and bridging this gap that right now still exists and is being not really kind of very clearly communicated. The other side is, though, the kind of the usability is right now we have a lot of chains. And the reality is if as a user you want to onboard into an app on another chain, it's a very complex and painful process. And as a user, you probably don't care as much which chain the app is on. And so the idea is to bring remote accounts which allow users to not worry about which app is on and kind of remove this complexity. It is important to note that bridging beyond just tokens, fungible tokens, right, ERC20s, is complicated. Bridging NFT is super complicated because you have royalties attached, you have a lot of other metadata attached. And if we're talking about some more custom data, it's even more complex. And so instead of doing bridging, we can actually create remote accounts on the other chain that can control some assets directly on that chain with the wallet from the source chain, right? So I can use my MetaMask on Near without switching network, signing kind of transactions on Near directly through the system. And all of the settlement is still happening through the kind of the communication protocol, kind of cross-chain communication protocol, but you don't need to move assets between these chains. And I think this actually addresses a lot of the security issues that we have with the bridges. And kind of beyond that, we're at the stage when we have kind of a lot of infrastructure and we have this really major problems across, social, across, gig protocols like Uber, Airbnb, and kind of with content, with media, with certification. Like we have all these problems, and it's time to actually start bringing these things up, right? It's start to building these protocols that actually connecting the kind of use cases of Web 2 to Web 3 and allowing to have the transparency and linkability to identity that we've always been talking about. So I think this is like for me kind of next year, I expect a lot of progress on this and I'm excited about it. And just to quickly mention, we have a NearCon happening in Lisbon in September, so everybody's invited. And thank you.